Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flack.
For you know how, like a father with his children, we exhorted each one of you and encouraged you and charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God, who calls you into his own kingdom and glory. That is 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 11 and 2. I am Sandra Flack. Welcome to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. I am so grateful that you are here, where you can find some encouragement and some community to support you along your parenting journey. I'm so excited. We have our favorite returning guest with us today, Dr. Jerrod Brown. But before we get to our conversation with Dr. Brown, want to talk a little bit more about the encouraging and community part of what we offer you, because raising children who experienced trauma and loss, and especially those who were prenatally exposed to alcohol or other drugs, it is a hard journey. I know that firsthand for my many years of parenting kiddos, adoptive mom with 5 adopted kiddos myself. Our oldest is now 34. She came to us when she was 8. And then we have 4 siblings that we adopted internationally. And they range in age from 26 down to 18. And the youngest 2 being diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. So I know how hard this journey can be. I'm living it still. Our youngest 2 sons, young adults, biologically, but much younger than that, cognitively, developmentally, and still live home, and we're still on this parenting journey. So I want to offer you resources that I didn't have in the early days of my parenting journey, parenting kids from hard places, especially kids with fetal alcohol syndrome or somewhere on the FASD spectrum. So we have training, we have this podcast, and we also have a support group. So I'd like for you to hear a little bit more about our group.
Sandra Flack, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So, did you know that FASD is the leading cause of developmental and learning disabilities worldwide? Yep. 1 in 20 school-age children in the United States has been prenatally exposed to alcohol. More than 80% of the children in child welfare, that means adoptive and foster placements, have an FASD. Most are either not diagnosed at all or they are misdiagnosed. Our kids that always have, it seems like every kiddo gets that ADHD diagnosis. Some of them get RAD, the RAD, reactive attachment disorder diagnosis, sometimes autism, oppositional defiance disorder, all of those things may or may not be accurate or may or not be true. Most likely they are symptomatic of prenatal exposure. I don't know if you guys can hear my puppy barking, but I'm down here in my office and I have a feeling my son just went outside without her. So hopefully I won't have to stop and interrupt what we're doing here. But anyway, as a mom of an 18 and a 20-year-old with fetal alcohol syndrome, I know it's difficult. It can be isolating, and we have this support community for you. I also offer one-on-one FASD coaching for parents and caregivers, as well as workshops online and in person. I do travel the country. Coming up, I'll be anywhere from Western New York this summer to Nashville to Chicago, I believe, this fall. So I do travel, I do speak, I do training. And so you can contact me if you're interested in having me come for an event or a conference or a support group. But I also offer the trainings online, interactive live webinars. So coming up, we've got some coming up for you. I know that this podcast is going to air the beginning of June. And I do have a 3-hour online deep dive into FASD coming up just in a few days, right around the corner. So you're not going to catch it unless you're hearing this on the Monday that this episode drops. But Thursday, June 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, I am offering a 3-hour online FASD workshop. And in July, I've got a couple more coming up. Wednesday, July 10th at 10 a.m. Eastern, I'm offering a free 1-hour intro to FASD. And that is a great one if you're just beginning to learn about FASD, or maybe that's what's going on at your house, but you want the grandparents to know, or the child care provider to know, or the school teacher, or the Sunday school teacher, whoever is part of your child's life who you feel would benefit from that training. It's free, it's 1 hour, and we go over all of the basics. So that's a great one. And then I'm offering the 3-hour session again in July. That will be July 24th, which is a Wednesday, July 24th at 10 a.m. Eastern. I'm just kind of experimenting with different days of the week and different times of the day to see what suits most people, or, just trying to catch anybody who might want the training. And if if you've been listening to this podcast and you feel like, I really would like one of those, but none of those times she ever offers works with my schedule, send me an email, sandraflack@justicefororphansny.org, and let me know what time, what day of the week, what time of day works best for you. And I'm happy to get one on the schedule that would fit with that. So I'm sure there's not just you, but other folks who may need a different time slot. So I'm just, testing out these different times, but please reach out to me if you're wanting something on a certain day of the week or a certain time. So also coming up in October, I am offering my deep dive into FASD using the Facets Neurobehavioral Model. It's 6 3-hour sessions. So it will be 6. I don't even want to tell you what day. You have to go to the website to figure out what day it is. I don't want to tell you the wrong day. I didn't write it down here, but we've already got it scheduled. But it's 6 weeks in a 6 weeks in a row, 3 hours, 6 sessions, 18 hours altogether, and that's the full-on Facets Neurobehavioral Model training. So you can go to our website, which is justicefororphansny.org. At the top of the page, you'll see a tab that says Training on the top of the homepage. When you click that, you'll see the drop-down FASD is listed there. So you would go to the FASD page and scroll down at the very bottom. I know you'll find the support group. There's stuff on there about the coaching and about training. So check that out. So that way you can sign up for anything that you are looking for. Also, shameless plug, as always, please, please, please follow or subscribe to this podcast, whatever platform that you listen on, or if you watch these episodes, if maybe you didn't know that we have a YouTube channel. It's the channel is at Justice for Orphans, and all of the podcast episodes in the video version are there. But wherever you watch or listen, please leave a review. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review. Follow it, subscribe. That makes the show pop up in people's search engines towards the top. If they're searching for a podcast about adoption or about foster care, or about FASD, we want to make sure that people, families, caregivers, parents who need this podcast can find it easily. So you can play a role in that by liking and subscribing. And also, you know what? Tell your fellow adoptive and foster parent friends about this podcast so that they can listen too. I would greatly appreciate that. So enough of all of that. We got to get to our guest, who has quite a bio for me to read here because I could never memorize all of this. But our returning guest, Dr. Jerrod Brown, is a professor, trainer, researcher, consultant with multiple years of experience in teaching on the college level. He's the founder and CEO of the American Institute for the Advancement of Forensic Studies. Jerrod has provided consultation services to caregivers, professionals, and organizations on the topics of autism spectrum disorder, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, confabulation, suggestibility. Those are things that get our kids in trouble, folks. Trauma and other life adversities, including alexithymia. We did a whole show about a year ago on alexithymia, executive dysfunction, criminal recidivism, traumatic brain injury, and youth fire setting. Dr. Brown has completed 4 separate master's degree programs and holds graduate certificates in neuroscience and the law, neuropsychology, autism, and other health disabilities, and traumatic brain injury. In 2021, Jerrod completed his postdoctoral certificate in leadership and organizational strategy and a professional certificate in forensic psychology. In 2023, he completed a diabetes care and education certificate. And currently, as if he's not busy enough, he is pursuing his 5th master's degree in applied clinical nutrition. Jerrod has conducted hundreds of workshops and webinars, published several articles, book chapters, and recently co-authored the book, Forensic Mental Health, A Source Guide for Professionals. Dr. Brown has been quoted in various magazine and newspaper articles and is regularly featured on national and international podcasts like this one that you are listening to. And he is also a foster dad. Please welcome back our resident expert on all of the things, Dr. Jerrod Brown. Hey, Jerrod, welcome back.
Sandy, thank you for having me, my friend, and always glad to be here.
Oh, it's always an honor to have you on. And this month, we're focusing a little bit more on foster and adoptive dads for the month of June. And you are a foster dad. So before we dive into our topic today, would you give us a little update? How is being a foster dad going?
Well, it's fantastic and life-changing, of course, because prior to that, I came from the science, what's the research say? But now being able to apply it in all practicality, it's really been a fun, rewarding, tiring experience at times too. But all the things I've learned outside of just the things we're doing now, I think have helped us a lot in terms of being on the lookout for certain things, digging deeper, and looking at the gut. We talked about the gut a million times. We definitely dug into gut brain health and have not only been consulting with a pediatrician, but a naturopathic doctor. And that's been very, very helpful in terms of kind of getting the gut more regulated. And that's helped with getting sleep. So anybody listening to this who is doing any kind of parenting with any child, if there are behavioral problems, if there are mood instability issues, irritability, sleep problems, lots of unexplained symptoms, look to the gut for number one, in my opinion. It might not be that, but the gut, again, is the hub of that immunity. And so many things branch out from the gut, including what's going on in the brain and what's going on with our sleep and our appetite. So frontline intervention, get the gut under control, be aware of what the child's eating, of course, food sensitivities, food allergies, some formula-based kinds of things that are fed to children can aggravate the gut, but talk to your healthcare provider about those kind of things. It can be very, very helpful and life-changing on so many levels.
Yeah. And you've got a little one, right? So I
Yeah,
don't,
yeah, oh
is
yeah,
it
very,
still,
very little.
yeah, still bottle fed? When you're looking at nutrition, what kinds of things are you guys dealing with?
Well, feeding specialists, we've been working with feeding specialists, special supplementation that has been recommended by the healthcare naturopathic people. So do it all in conjunction with the healthcare providers. But
Right.
yeah, she's over 15 months now. We got her at about 6 days of age, and yeah, things are really progressing quite nicely. And she seems to be very stable and happy and very healthy.
Mm.
And we're loving it, and we love her very much.
Well, thank you for what you're
Of
doing,
course.
and love to hear that. So,
Absolutely.
like you said, you now you're wearing the dad hat, but you're also the professional that we always love to hear from. So, you always take us deep in the weeds, I say, on topics that every adoptive and foster parent and professional should know. And today we're going to discuss neuro-parenting. It's funny, my notes must have auto-corrected because I just glanced over and it says Euro-parenting, but I know it's neuro-parenting.
The one and only
Yeah.
neuro-parenting. So there's a lot of names out there for this, but basically at its core is just it's neuroscience informed parenting. So you're taking neuroscience research and infusing it with all the great parenting practices you're already doing. Now, in my opinion, like if you become like a neuroscience informed parent, you're not getting rid of anything you're doing. It's only maybe enhancing what you're doing. Sometimes it's been referred to as brain-based parenting.
Mhm.
It's neuroscience and psychology are combined into this as well. You'd want to take into account, obviously, prenatal factors because that's where it starts, especially, I mean, if you are raising a child that has FASD or it's been exposed to drugs, any kind of chemicals, we need to be aware that those in utero traumatic experiences impact the brain and body. So becoming neuroscience informed is just going to better help you understand maybe why that child is a little more irritable, why they may sleep more, why they're just more fussy as they get older, why they may look like they have ADHD or behavioral social problems, all these things. Neuroparenting, in my opinion, understands sleep. Lots of
Mhm.
neuroscience research on sleep. Sleep is number one to health, in my opinion. Please feel free to disagree. That's just where I'm at because just think about it. How, if you go without a night of sleep, how do you feel?
Yeah.
Not too good. But what happens if it's a child who's been exposed to drugs and alcohol in utero and those traumatic exposures damage parts of the brain related to melatonin receptors or circadian rhythm
Mm.
alignment? Children like that are going to have profound sleep issues where they may be chronically sleep deprived, not just a night, but night after night, year after year. And chronic sleep deprivation in and of itself can oftentimes mimic symptoms of ADHD or other kinds of behavioral disruptive patterns. The gut brain health access, you want to understand that. These are all things we've talked about on different episodes we've done together. And again, maybe you've never heard of the gut brain access and you ask yourself, why should I care about the gut when my child has all these behavioral problems? Because a lot of times that's linked to poor digestive health because a large portion of some of our main hormones, including dopamine, serotonin, are produced in the gut. And the
Mm.
gut's the hub of immunity. And if someone has poor gut health functioning, that impacts the brain. We're all aware that attachment's important.
Mhm.
Neuroscience informed parenting helps you better understand all the ins and outs of attachment. Attachment is not as simple as picking up the child and giving that child hugs and saying, I love you and eye contact. all very important and very critical. But if we look at some of the children who've been exposed to drugs and alcohol in utero, they may actually have oxytocin production abnormalities in their brain. So at a neurochemical, neurohormone level, oxytocin plays a critical role in bonding. And if you adopt that child and they've come from some really tough experiences, bonding can be way more tricky and take way more time. So understanding neuroscience can help you better understand those things as well. And as that child gets older, gets into a K through 12 environment, if you understand these things in a much better light, you probably are going to be more informed on being able to talk to the school teachers.
Mhm.
You're going to be more informed on, is this the best placement for schooling for my child? Because what happens if my child does have severe brain-based impairments and they're placed into a classroom with children who do not have those experiences? Unfortunately, also often those children act out, they fall behind, and sometimes the teachers may mislabel that child as a problem child when they're not. They might just have some brain differences caused by trauma in early childhood or during the prenatal world, that nothing that they're doing wrong is intentional. It could be really rooted in experiences before they were even born. So those are a few things to take into account if you want to study like neuroscience informed parenting. Before I get into kind of neuroscience 101, Sandy, any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, one thing that struck me, because I know, like you said, we talk about sleep a lot when we have our conversations, and the gut and the attachment. And you mentioned about school age. One of my kiddos who's 18, fetal alcohol syndrome, really struggling in school. And we were homeschooling and then started integrating him into the school. And then about a month ago, we thought, well, we'll start him a full day. It was disastrous. Um, we, figured out, we have a great counselor who is FASD informed, which is wonderful. But we figured out it was just causing him way too much anxiety to be there all day. And then when he's got a lot of anxiety, and he has very poor executive function. So when he's got a lot of stress, it comes out of his mouth, like words, right? So he's not aggressive or violent or any of that, but he'll swear. So then he's in trouble at school for that. And then, when you have school administrators, principal, vice principal, teachers, social worker at school, and they don't really understand, they definitely don't understand the FASD part of it, but they see behaviors as something that they have to issue consequences for. So I had to take them to school on this,
Yeah.
and so, because consequences don't work. My son was not going to learn from a consequence that they wanted to issue him. So what would you say about that part of it, when it comes to kids learning from consequences and why that really doesn't work? Because you do have to understand the brain, right, in order to understand why it doesn't work and then figure out what does work.
Abstract reasoning deficits are at the top of the list, in my opinion, why traditional consequences don't work. Because if you are a parent or school teacher and you're asking that child or teenager, tell me why you did that. How could you do that different next time? That can be very tricky for someone that has abstract reasoning deficits, which is a hallmark deficit of FASD. It's connecting the dots, it's seeing the forest through the trees, it's planning for the future. It's even understanding your rights to remain silent if someone's pulled over by the police. Why do so many of these kids, if they have contact with law enforcement, might have some issues? They don't understand like an oath or a plea and all these things. So it gets tricky. So what do you do about it? Become informed about these things, making it very concrete, consulting with the parents or the caregivers if appropriate, because they're the true experts. What works, what doesn't? How do you teach a skill? It's not just teaching it one time, it's linking it to different things, it's scaffolding it, it's practicing it, not just in the classroom. but how do you apply that to walking in the hall
Mhm.
or in the lunchroom or on the school bus? Because you can teach it in one location and it looks like the person's learned it, but applying it and generalizing it and using it in different settings, it's not going to happen in most cases, in my opinion, partially because the abstract reasoning, the executive function, working memory deficits, cognitive inflexibility, all those things. And these are all neuroscience terms. I mean, if you learn neuroscience, you're going to know these things. And what you said too, without saying it, your son probably on information overload, lower cognitive reserves. So maybe you go to the classroom and you have good energy, but people with FASD brains, their energy gets depleted very quickly, especially when asked a lot of cognitive demanding tasks.
Mhm.
If they're multitasking, if there's a lot of competing factors where there's overheard conversations,
Yes.
you're listening to a lecture, you have to take notes, all that is hard for any brain, but it's especially difficult for someone that's had a lot of trauma in utero or early childhood. And neuroscience can help you understand and help you be more patient and help you make changes and maybe get more breaks and use less words and make things more developmentally, emotionally, and socially appropriate rather than relying on how old the person is on paper.
Right. Yeah. And those were the things, right, that I had to, you know,
Yeah.
in my own, understanding of that, be able to explain that because and one of the things that we were able to figure out even with talking to our son is it was too many people, too crowded, too loud. And he would do okay in his classroom because it's a special education classroom, small number of students, good support there. But anywhere outside of that environment is where he was having a hard time. And then because we brought him in, we put him in, we'd slowly been increasing the number of hours he was in school. But since it was the end of, we're at the end of the school year, and by the time our listeners hear this, our school year will be over. But for him, this was going on in the end of April, beginning of May, and they didn't really have a great way to fill his schedule up because it was the end of the school year. So he ended up having a study hall at the end of the day for the last period of the day, which the whole week and a half that he was going full time, he would call almost every day and ask, "Can you come and get me? Can I come home early?" And we were like, initially, it was like, "Oh, you have one more period left. You'll be fine. You can do it." But really, he was trying to tell us, done. I can't do this anymore. I can't be here any longer. And because it was also the study hall, it was very unstructured. And it's the end of the day. He's exhausted and he couldn't hold it together. And that's where he was getting into some trouble. So, long story short, we shortened his day back up and went back to a shorter day for him. And next year he's considered a senior.
Yeah.
Although he could be in the program that he's in, he could be in until he's 22. Although somebody already told him at the school that next year he's a senior, so he's planning on like, I'm done. I'm not going to go till I'm 22. But I'm not sure if we will send him full time next year because we figured out that it's not a good fit for him.
Yeah. Every child, every teenager, every adult is different, wired differently, different experiences, and it has to be individualized, I think, to be most effective. And not every setting is going to work for
Yeah.
every child or teenager, even college setting. So, yeah, taking those individual differences into account, really through a neuroscience lens, can help because neuroscience can also help us better understand reading development, learning disabilities, our attentional capabilities. Why do some people have a hard time staying focused? Why do our minds drift off?
Mhm.
Neuroscience definitely helps me better understand these topics. Why do people with FASD so often have math issues and calculation problems? I mean, if you understand the brain structures responsible for all these things, I mean, it'll help you have a better understanding, more curiosity, and more patience. If your child, teenager, or adult has a long-standing pattern of aggressive behavior, problematic behavior, they're
Mhm.
extremely impulsive, their emotions are all over the map, or even their social skills are impacted, neuroscience can help inform the development of a goal plan, intervention plan, I think much more effectively than not understanding some of the neuroscience bases behind some of these topics, the good and the bad. From a social lens too, you got a whole line of research literature that talks about social neuroscience. And unfortunately, we know all too often most folks with FASD and other kinds of prenatal experiences do have some social skill limitations. Sometimes it could look like empathy deficits, getting along with other people in a group setting, how to make friends appropriately, even how to pick up on stranger danger when someone's trying to manipulate them or take advantage, or perspective taking, theory of mind, mentalization. Looking at social neuroscience, that can be very, very helpful. And in the educational realm, you have a whole line of research literature on educational neuroscience. So in the education realm, if you're a professor, teacher, whatever you do with learning, look at some of the research literature on educational neuroscience, mind, brain, neuroscience kinds of research. Neuroeducation is a good term. You'll find all kinds of articles on that. And that can help inform your instructional development and curriculum and strategy and even classroom placement with certain students. Some students may need to sit closer up front, some can be further behind. All those, the lighting in the classroom, the sensory component of this, why some students may have some language types of issues, things like that. All these things can play a role, and neuroscience can be applied to really almost any setting, because you have neuro leadership. If any of you are in leadership roles, there's lots of research on the use of leadership in workplace settings. It can be applied to the criminal justice setting. I give talks on things related to neurocriminology. It's basically the infusion of neuroscience into criminology research. I give lots of talks on neural counseling. So if you're a therapist, social worker, psychologist listening to this, whole line of research on neural counseling, neuropsychotherapy. And pretty much collectively, this research as a whole says if you become neuroscience informed, you're going to be in a better position as a parent, as a professional, as a coworker, and you'll just hopefully better understand complex human behavior on a deeper level.
Yeah, so that brings us to, most of our listeners are adoptive or foster parents like you and I. So, what should, how does this apply to our parenting and our kids?
All the things I spoke about, you're going to be better off understanding child placement for schooling, behavioral patterns. It might help you illuminate why some of your children have more behavioral problems. So, for example, information processing. If you're a parent and you're talking really fast, really agitated, and you're amped up to your child who has an FASD brain, that can overwhelm their brain very quickly. They shut down, they act out. If you ask a ton of how and why questions without pairing it with strategies and examples and visuals, a lot of times it doesn't go anywhere. So I think those are a few things. And I do think if parents understand these topics, it can help them be more patient. And I think that's one of the best skills, in my opinion, a parent can have, is just being patient, curious, because the symptom or the behavior often is the leaf of the problem. It's not, dig deeper. What else could be going on? Sleep deprivation, blood sugar issues, gut health issues, fear, anxiety, trauma triggers. Those are some things I think, practically speaking.
Yeah, and it makes me think of just the other night with our son, the same son who's been pretty overwhelmed with school. Just the other night, he and I were having a conversation about something, as we have conversations to the best of his ability. But my husband came in and he chimed in to the conversation, and my son was like, "Stop talking, Dad," and put his hand up, right? Which could look and did look very disrespectful if we didn't understand the information processing part, because he was trying to have this conversation and communicate with me about something, and then somebody else comes in and adds information, right, in a different perspective, and he it was like you could see his brain was like could not receive that, like that just overwhelmed him. So it's like, stop talking. And really what he was, it might have been sounded rude to someone who maybe would have, not known really what was going on, but he was basically, he needed to not have any more, verbal input coming into him. Like and I think that understanding the brain and knowing that that's one of his symptoms and he has a hard time with that, we didn't discipline or send him to his room or give him a lecture or anything that would have probably just escalated the situation. We recognized, and then later on we were able to say, next time just say, excuse me, there's a nicer way to say it. But we understood what he was trying to do, because it was a trigger for him to, it would overwhelm him, all that information.
Perfect example, multitasking, not good.
Yeah.
Multi-step instructions, probably not good. And if you know the person's already amped up, probably not the best time to try to teach problem, unless there's safety concern, that obviously, and you didn't use the word mindfulness meditation, but technically going to someone's room, listening to some soft music, sitting quietly somewhere, a lot of great neuroscience research around mindfulness meditation too, on slowing down the brain and reducing inflammation in the body. I mean, all kinds of great things around that. So if you can practice mindfulness meditation, great practical strategy as well.
Yeah, we found that towards the end of when, he didn't make it quite 2 weeks in school full time, and we went back to the shorter day, but headphones that played music, that he started bringing those to school. So during those times when he was feeling stressed or in that study hall, he could put the headphones on. He had his music, and it was just a way for him to, like, sort of not be there in a way, and feel, that he had it brought him to that place of safety, and definitely helped him.
And this neuroscience that pairs very nicely with trauma-informed care. I mean,
Yes.
it's a great complement. It's really, I mean, not one and the same, but they work off each other so nicely, because again, trauma impacts the brain, impacts the body.
Yes.
Trauma in and of itself can cause the brain not to work well.
Right.
It can cause executive function. It can cause sleep issues. And unfortunately, so many kids that have been exposed to drugs and alcohol in utero also have had maybe some early life trauma after birth. So on top of the in utero, now you have early life experiences of adversity, basically the adverse childhood experiences research. So pairing those two together, if you're a trauma-informed parent, I don't think it hurts to become neuroscience informed on some level.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why when I became a facilitator of the facets model, that's a neurobehavioral model. So it's, understanding the symptoms of prenatal exposure to alcohol presents as behavioral, right, in nature, but understanding the brain, how it was impacted by the alcohol, and then understanding these symptoms, and then how do we support the individual, because it's not that they, won't do what they need to do. It's not that they won't stop misbehaving or whatever. It's that, it's really a demonstration of there's something more going on, and this person needs more support, more accommodations. So it's one of the things I love about the neurobehavioral model, because I find, I've, been an adopted parent for 25 years, right? So didn't understand the impact of trauma in those early days, and definitely didn't know anything about prenatal exposure to alcohol and that impact. And so many of us have kids who have experienced both, right? They've come to us through foster care or an overseas orphanage or whatever it was. So they've experienced that trauma, whatever that led to them having to be in our homes now. But then we find out that there may be prenatal exposure to alcohol, and it's kind of like next level stuff, right? Because you've compounded it, and it makes the journey really hard. So understanding how these things impact the brain, and that it's not willful disobedience, they're not being oppositional on purpose, but that there's a brain injury in a sense. and we need to understand the brain.
I hear great things about that model. I've not been through that. The only thing I would say, and maybe they do this, is I really approach everything from a neural bio-behavioral approach. So you bring in the biology, blood sugar dysregulation, hormones, neurotransmitters, circadian rhythms, what we eat, the gut, inflammation. That's the biology, the biochemical aspect. That is probably, I'm not saying it's more important, but if you look at complex behavior, usually neurohormones, neurotransmitters, the guts off, those kind of things are like the root. I mean, so definitely, I don't, does that model look at the biological factors too that contribute to this?
Not as much as what you're talking about.
Okay.
But it does talk about how, nutrition can be a symptom, right? Because we can have kiddos that don't recognize that they're hungry, don't recognize that they're full, or have that extreme sugar craving or addiction can be part of it as well.
No, definitely. You want me to give just some basic strategies through a neuroscience
Yes.
lens that are,
Yes.
I mean, we all know these things. They're good for the brain, good for the body, but get good sleep if the sleep is off. Could be insomnia, it could be sleep apnea. I mean, there's all kinds of sleep disorders out there. Manage your daytime fatigue. If you notice you got a lot of daytime fatigue, what could be causing that? Dig deeper, work with a doctor. Could it be something's off with your hormones? Could it be a blood sugar thing? Do you skip meals for hours on end where you just go, go, go all day long? Something to look at. Music interventions, fantastic. Art-based approaches, fantastic. Animal-assisted therapy, excellent. Eating healthy, obviously, we know that. Obviously, talk to your healthcare provider. But if you're eating fast food every day versus if someone's eating healthy, organic, lots of fruits and vegetables, you're probably going to feel a little different than eating the fast food every day. Manage your screen time exposure. Too much screen time, especially in the evening before bed, is not good. Exercise, very good for brain health. I'm not saying go out and run a marathon, lift heavy weights, but talk to your healthcare provider. What can someone do? Is it walking? Is it swimming? Movement, sedentary behaviors, a threat to human health. Not good. If someone's laying around all the time, getting movement, very, very good. Being around positive people. If you're isolating all the time, that impacts brain health. Look at some of the loneliness literature in brain health. Very scary. Being around positive people. Volunteering. You'll find a lot of literature on people that get a volunteer job likely have better brain health, social health. They're getting outside of themselves and giving back. Expanding one's vocabulary, learning a new language, picking up a new hobby, actively reading, finding ways to reduce procrastination. These are all fantastic for brain health. There's a lot of literature on the benefits of jigsaw puzzles. Really fascinating research. If you Google jigsaw puzzles and brain health, you can find some really cool stuff. It's been shown to improve cognition and concentration and attention and all kinds of things like that. Manage your weight. If someone is overweight, which unfortunately way too many people are in our country, that's a threat to our brain health. There's plenty of research that shows that chronic obesity can exacerbate executive function impairments. Getting out in nature, green space exposure or blue space exposure, really fascinating in terms of what that does to our brain and body in terms of a really good thing. And I guess before I kind of wrap up just with other things to consider when we think about neuroscience informed parenting and even trauma informed parenting, I would highly encourage you, I'm not asking anyone to be experts on this, but learn the basics of executive function. self-regulation, which is self-control, inhibition, impulse control. Learn about theory of mind, perspective taking,
Mhm.
alexithymia, emotional blindness, problems naming, labeling, describing emotions, language, pragmatic language, receptive language, and just expressive language. That'll help you better understand communication patterns, sensory processing,
Mhm.
abstract reasoning, and sleep. Those would be some of the big ones. Not an all-encompassing list, but those
Mhm.
are some topics that you'd want to learn about. And we have done talks on that, I believe, on almost all of them. Not every one of them, but almost all of them. I think we've done individual podcasts on.
Yeah, over the past couple of years, if our listeners were
Yeah.
to scroll back into our catalog of episodes, we've done several
Yeah.
on many of those, and a whole episode on executive function or dysfunction, on alexithymia, gosh, so many of them. And I just find as a parent, of kiddos with trauma and with prenatal exposure, being curious and learning all the time. If you see books about these things, listen to podcasts about these things, always be learning, because it's just, you can grab a nugget. I was just listening to another FASD podcast the other day, and this a mom was talking. She's a professional, but also a parent of a kiddo with FASD, and she was talking about how they set him up in a little home, like a little house, like almost like a tiny house. She didn't call it a tiny house, but they sort of gutted it and started over, um, you know, down to the studs, and just started over. And when they were putting things together, like the kitchen, she had the young man, I think he was by then 23, there was no appliances, and there was not even a sink. There was nothing in there yet, but she said, show me what you would do, or where would you go, to make spaghetti, right? She didn't say spaghetti. I'm just pulling that out of there. I'm not sure what she said, but basically where he would just have that tendency to find the pan, find the pasta, like where would you go to the sink to get the water? Because that's how they wanted to lay out the kitchen, right? They wanted to lay it out how his brain worked, so that way he didn't have to forget where things were, remember where to put the things. It was just laid out how, what best suited his brain. And just keeping that in mind for every aspect of this little house that he was going to be able to live in somewhat independently, but interdependence. But even then, keeping the brain in mind and how his brain worked. And that helped him be much more successful in that house.
Love it. That's dedication. That
Yeah.
send me a link. I'd love to listen to that.
Yeah, definitely I will. And then, because one of our sons, who's he'll be 21, we live out in the country. We have a lot of property, and my husband's putting up a little garage, and we decided to attach a little apartment to the garage for our son who's 23. So he does work and he does drive, but he has accommodations at work. And he likes to, build things, and he repairs golf carts. So we felt like this is a good place for him to feel like he's got some independence, but yet we're right here. So it got me thinking about when we lay this place out, when we try to, begin to set this up, we need to involve him on where things should be. Because this mom even said they didn't put closets and dressers in, because that just makes places for him to lose things, because he wouldn't remember it was there because he couldn't see it. So just fascinating
It
things.
really
So
is. Yes.
yeah. Oh, I'm always trying to learn, right? And the more we learn, the better we can support our kids.
I've been to school a long time. I have a lot of degrees and certifications, and I don't think I know that much. I mean, I'm learning constantly, and yes, I'm never in a position where I think I know a lot. And yeah, I think just lifelong learning is the only way to go,
Yeah.
in
And
my opinion.
becoming an expert, so to speak, on what, like I said, my boys both have FAS. I've had to become the expert on that, because I couldn't rely on the pediatrician or the school teacher or the principal or someone else to know these things, because they just don't. I'm educating them because I'm immersed in it and I'm living it 24/7. So, to be the best parent I can be to the boys God has given me, I need to understand how their brains work, how their brain works, and be able to support them as best as we can. So always a journey of learning for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. Yep. Always a great reminder for all of us. Just keep learning, digging, growing, asking questions, be curious.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up on this, because throughout the month of June, we're sort of focusing on our adoptive and foster dads a little bit here. So as we wrap up, any words of encouragement that you would offer the dads?
Yes, definitely. You're doing a great job. You learn about the basics of this. Again, you don't have to be experts, but we all know sleep's important. We all know eating's healthy is important. We all know that movement is important, but just spending quality time with your child, regardless of how old they are, disconnect from the technology. Don't multitask when you're with that child. Focus on the child. Lean in, look at the child, laugh, be playful, create an atmosphere of peace and kindness and calmness and curiosity and attachment. I think good things can happen and will happen.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Brown, for being with us, sharing your expertise. It's always, I know our listeners love it when you're the guest. So we love having you back. We'll have you back. I know we've got some other episodes lined up. So at least once a month you'll be with us. And I'm grateful that you share your expertise with us, our audience. And I'm learning so much, and I know that they are too.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a good conversation with Dr. Jerrod Brown. I hope that you felt encouraged and better equipped for your parenting journey. Don't feel overwhelmed. I know he talks about so many amazing things, but even if you pull out one or two of the things that you learned about and try to begin to learn more and to apply them, it really, really does make a difference. And even if you just focus on sleep, and gut health, get off the screens, get out into nature, that really makes a huge difference. I know I'm recording this podcast. It's actually the very end of May. It's about to be Memorial Day weekend, and we're headed up to our camp in the Adirondacks. And it's just a place where our son does so much better because it's the blue space and the green space, and we're out in nature more. We're not on the gadgets as much. We are, it's a slower pace. It's quieter, and he thrives in that environment, and he notices it himself. In fact, he was having that hard time for those 2 weeks in school, and he said, I'm just going to quit school and we can just go to camp like that. He knew that's what he needed. So we're headed there for about 5 days for Memorial Day weekend. So those are the things. It can be, sometimes it just sounds so simple, but yet it works. So again, focus on the sleep, focus on the healthy eating, getting off the screens and getting out into nature. And even that can have a huge difference in our kids and in us and in our relationship with them, and learn everything that you can about the brain, because it's our kids' brains work differently, and we need to come to understand that and learn how to best support that. So I hope that was encouraging for you today, because that's what we want to do. We want to encourage you and equip you for your parenting journey. So don't forget, we have the support community. We have the FASD trainings that are available online as well, and this podcast. So I hope that you will check all of that out. Go to our website, justicefororphansny.org, to learn more, and to sign up for workshops and coaching and the support group, if that's something that you're interested in. Make sure you check the show notes for this episode, because all of the links for those things are there. And be sure to find and follow us on social media. Justice for Orphans is on both Facebook and Instagram, and so am I, Sandra Flack. You can find me both platforms as well. And don't forget our YouTube channel at Justice for Orphans. So I hope you check those things out. And again, I'm so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans. And check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.